My name is Jill Phillips, and I'm the creator of Whose Shoes, a popular approach to co-production. I was named as an HSJ 100 wildcard and want to help give a voice to others, talking about their ideas and experiences. I'll be chatting with people from all sorts of different perspectives, walking in their shoes. If you are interested in the future of healthcare and like to hear what other people think, or perhaps even contribute at some point, Whose Shoes Wildcard is for you. I've been really looking forward to recording today's podcast. I've only ever met Bob Klaber online, and I'm really looking forward to meeting him in person one day. He's charismatic and fascinating, and I'm delighted, Bob, that you agreed to do this Wildcard Whose Shoes podcast episode with me today. I'm so looking forward to finding out more about you. But from what I know already, you're a paediatrician, and I'd love to see you in action looking after those children that you care for, as kindness is at the centre of your work. I've loved joining your monthly sessions on a Thursday evening. Indeed, there's one tonight. It is a truly global group. It must have something very special when people like Kath Kroc and Nikki Macklin join regularly from Australia and New Zealand at 4 a.m. I love being part of this global movement for kindness and seeing something that could be regarded as soft and fluffy becoming centre stage. Indeed, being featured shortly at the World Quality and Safety Forum in Gothenburg. How did that happen? I'm sure Bob can tell us more. So welcome, Bob. Thank you so much for joining me. Can you tell me a bit more about yourself and what's important to you?
Good afternoon, Jill, and thank you for inviting me. I think I'm going to take up a new thing of not letting other people introduce me, because I'm not sure I quite recognise the person you've described in any shape or form. So anyone listening, prepare for some disappointment, I'm afraid. But it's lovely to be here, and it's great and really important, I think, to be spending some time thinking and reflecting and talking about such an important topic. And sort of moving into the doing and the action bit, and we'll maybe come to that. What can I tell you about me? Well, kindness is a really important thing, and we'll get into that in some detail. I was sort of brought up, I think, with a sort of ethos of be kind, be helpful as two important things. I'm definitely a learner at heart. I absolutely love these sorts of conversations, and I have this wonderfully broad and varied role that really gives me an extraordinary opportunity to just keep learning. I learn a huge amount from my patients and their amazing families. That's been a key part for me. I absolutely love people and spending time with them. I think this wonderful combination that healthcare has around people and humans and humanity, but also being underpinned by science is really key. So as well as working as a paediatrician, which the sad news in a sense is a relatively small part of my time, but I have a full-time job on the executive team at Imperial College Healthcare, which is a wonderful trust in northwest London, a big place. We play a big part in looking after the sort of 2.5 million people who live in West London. We employ about 15,000 people, and many of people listening might know St Mary's or Charing Cross or Hammersmith, that are 3 big teaching hospitals. We also run an eye hospital, the Western Eye, and Queen Charlotte's Maternity Hospital, but really trying to do that in a way that really thinks about quality of care in its widest domains. So absolutely making sure care is safe and people have a really good experience of care, but thinking beyond just this episode of care, thinking about anything we do in a health service is contextualising people's wider lives, and try to be really good and thoughtful about that. But loads we can talk about, loads to get stuck into, but I hope that gives a little bit of an essence about the things that really matter to me.
I think that's a brilliant start, Bob, and I love the way you were talking there about contextualising healthcare in people's lives. And I guess that's what I've tried to do with Whose Shoes, that it's not just about, I think one of the original Whose Shoes cards going back 14 years now was that something around, it's not just a set of services, it's someone having a life. And that was around social care at the time. And my sort of big vision really has been trying to join things up around people who really don't give a monkeys about quite which service and which individual is providing which bit of their care. I think we had something about my backbones in Birmingham and my liver's in Liverpool or something, for people, for individuals, it's just getting kind people who help them with what they need, isn't it?
It exactly is. And I remember, I should know the exact number. I'm going to misquote the number. Somebody better at maths needs to get a calculator out and do 24 times 365. But you get to some sort of number like 8,620, something like that. And that's the number of hours in a year. And I did a little slide where I was thinking about maybe some of the families who come and spend 2 hours a year with me. And this pathetic, tiny amount of time and intervention, and it's very easy to think that that's all very important. Contextualise maybe with 50 hours or 100 hours that they might spend with professionals in total. Contextualise within 8,620 hours a year of their wider lives. So our moments of intervention are really small in lots of ways. They're really insignificant in people's lives. That's not to say they don't and can't add value, but I think we've got to be much smarter and much more thoughtful about, and actually let's get honest and open. You know, Jill, you think maybe I should need to start doing this with some of the children, young people I look after, to say, look, you know, we've got half an hour here together in the context of how can I be helpful? How can I be useful? And I think getting into sort of almost co-design of that moment in time together is a really sort of thoughtful way of doing it. It's not how we're taught traditionally, you know, the sort of power that the doctor sits with. So there's a really interesting dynamic here about how we turn that on its head. I talk about picking the telescope up from the other side quite a lot, which feels like a key part of my world at the moment.
That's really interesting. I think some of the work, I think you probably love some of the scenario cards we've got working with children. So there's one that says, the doctor keeps going on about history, but I want to tell him that I hate history and I'm really good at maths.
Oh, I love that. That's wonderful. Well, and look, my first experience of co-production going back 10, 12 years, 13 years ago was with a group of young people who we got to know because they had sickle cell disease. That was the piece that brought them together. And it was the first bit we were really true and open to sort of deep co-production and asked very, very open questions. But, you know, let me admit and confess, we thought we knew what the answers would be. So we thought when we were asking what are the things that really matter to you, they would be worrying about how long, when they're in the emergency department, how long it takes us to give them good pain relief or those sorts of things. So very sort of medical measures. We didn't touch a single sentence on that stuff. People were talking about, I really want to be a lawyer. Can I still be a lawyer if I've got sickle cell disease? I'll always remember that. And it just completely blows your mind that we were faffing around on these, you know, not unimportant things, but in the grand scheme of things, unimportant things, and completely failing to pay attention to the things that really mattered, the things that were really worrying them. So, you know, great learning for me all those years back is genuinely and deeply and with a real sense of curiosity, asking questions like, what are the things that really matter to you, in a really open way, and being prepared to listen hard and you know, be surprised by the answer, challenge your own preconceptions about what people might come up with. So yeah, really amazing moment. I can remember that conversation to this day.
And unless people feel that they, you know, whether they're children or adults, that they can actually say what's worrying them. So some of our cards are obviously more serious, so it might be that, and someone trying to be kind, so, you know, I'm going to put you to sleep now and you won't feel anything.
Yeah.
And actually the dog was put to sleep the week before, and just that wording and the terror, you know, that someone's got absolutely no idea that particular kind of juxtaposition has come together.
Yeah, and that's what such an important learning story. And I just think we have to be so thoughtful about this. I can think personally, and I'm sure people listening, we get this stuff wrong. I'm quite self-conscious of being 6'3" and you know, increasingly grey-haired man who, you know, the engagement piece. So I spend a lot of time sitting on the floor. It's why anyone who knows me well, I'm always pretty scruffy and very, very rarely wear a suit. You know, I think being a paediatrician, that, you know, the ties end up in babies' nappies and you need to sit on the floor a lot. But seriously, I mean, if you think about the way our consultation rooms are set up, I'm doing a lot of stuff related to my exec role around redesigning hospitals, and all three of our wonderful main hospitals are falling down and need redesign. If anyone listening happens to have a couple of spare £1 billion to invest in that, please get in touch. But trying to think really hard about actually how do you design spaces where the power is shared, and the idea of a doctor sat behind a desk with his or her name on the door, and all their letters of great achievement behind it. It's just like, why on earth would you set up a consulting room in that space? We need to set up listening rooms, not consulting rooms. So lots for us to think about and improve on that.
Coincidentally, I saw on Twitter yesterday, I can't remember exactly what context, but someone was like, really? And you got a name of a consultant outside a door blank to fill in the actual name, but it had Mr. ready to fill in the surname, and like hashtag everyday sexism. So that's
wow.
an aside, but wow.
Well, I'm a big one. It's interesting, and not everybody's comfortable with this, and there's a really interesting thing. I mean, I personally have found first names just a really, really, really important equalizer around things. So I don't let the medical students call me Dr. Klaber. I just don't think it's helpful on that, trying to create psychological safety and things. Now, people have very fairly come back, particularly junior people. I've heard a number of come back and say, look, that I've worked so hard for that, and people don't believe I'm a doctor, and I always get accused as being a nurse. There's some really interesting sexism angles on it, particularly sort of younger women who are highly qualified doctors but don't get recognized as that because of everyday sexism in our society, have sort of pushed back a bit and said, look, I need to call myself Dr. X rather than my first name, because so I think that's a really fair and valid point. But I think wherever possible, we are all just human beings. I mean, if we really truly believe in inclusion and equity, we are just human beings. We have to relate to people in that way. And I think anything we can do on that front is really key. And you introduced this not soft and fluffy piece, Jill, about kindness. And that is so right. This is the absolute starting point of safe, high quality care, without a shadow of a doubt.
And I think we're so much on the same page with that. With our Whose Shoes workshop, we've always had like, come along in casual clothes, come along and don't introduce yourselves around the table, don't wear your NHS lanyards. And then it's not about hiding who you are at all, but it's about as human beings coming together. And if it comes up naturally in the conversation that you're a consultant at the hospital, or you're whatever role you are, but on the other hand, if you get, people introducing themselves around the table and it's like, I'm the chief executive and remind me who little person you are, then it cuts across everything when you're actually trying to get people to open up and just talk to each other as human beings.
I totally agree. And, it's largely irrelevant what your role is, how you behave, what are the things that matter to you, how you make other people feel around you becomes the really, really key things. I mean, yes, there are still significant levers related to positional power that a chief executive can sort of get done, but I totally agree with you. I think, and the really amazing leaders, they don't need to use that stuff. There'll be moments when it's very helpful, and because of all the great listening they've done, then they're in a great position to change the direction of their organization or their company or their charity or whatever it is they're doing based on that listening. But your point is absolutely right. If you go into it with all this sort of baggage around you, all you're doing is putting a wall up for people to be honest and be true and be straight. And back to this thing, we're just humans. It's not, no one's more important than anyone else.
And interestingly, we've found that works helpfully, more so almost in the other direction, that people don't say join our conversations in their professional role, they join as people. So then it might come out that perhaps the chief executive's worried about her own mum with dementia, or her child with learning disabilities, or whatever sort of personal. And again, people don't have to bring up anything personal, but people very quickly get drawn into the fact that these other people actually care as well. And then by sort of that leveling, that's how people co-produce the solutions together.
Yeah, and you've got me sort of thinking really about stories. And one of the bits of learning that I just absolutely love, and a wonderful friend on the East Coast of the States, Kate Hilton, helped me to understand this. But this is Marshall Gantz's work around public narrative and storytelling. And again, I'm sure lots of your wonderfully thoughtful listeners will have picked this stuff up before. But if not, do have a look. And this idea around self, around us, and around now. So what Marshall Gantz talks about is it's this idea of, it's not about what I've achieved and what's on my CV and all that sort of stuff. That's just deeply boring. And you didn't really introduce me around that, and I wouldn't have let you anyway, because I'm much more interested to know, well, what do I really care about? What gets me up in bed in the morning? What do I worry about? What am I passionate about? And what Self Us Now does is this idea that if you want to tell a really good story, you have to put a bit of yourself out there. Actually, what do I stand for? What do I care about? What really matters? And then the us bit is, how do we connect? So I guess part of what you and I are trying to do is just put a bit of self out around not what we've done or all this stuff, but actually, what do we care about? What are we passionate about? And maybe that might connect with people listening. And then this sense of now, I love this piece about urgency, and I think that's a really, really important thing. This is not a topic that I'm prepared to let get kicked down the road. Oh yeah, well, the trouble is the NHS is, we haven't got enough money at the moment. No. This is a starting point. This is an urgent starting point. We have to change how we're doing things now. And I think that I think that sense of now, of urgency, is really, really important. And I think with the conversations we've been doing, we've been really focusing in on that piece about, let's act, let's move, this is urgent, let's do something now.
That's fantastic. And I think I've got to get you, Bob, to come along to one of our Who's Shoes workshops.
I'd love to. Absolutely. I have a bicycle. I'd love to be there.
So we've had right from the beginning, and Fabob's Flo, my big partner in crime, obstetrician at Kingston Hospital, Florence Wilcock, has been very instrumental in pushing this even more. But right from the beginning of Who's Shoes, we've had a kind of action-focused approach. And I think very relevant to what you've just said, we kind of sow the seed right the way through the workshop that people have come along, not just because they want to improve things and they can pick out what needs to happen and what whoever they are, need to do, but actually that they individually are passionate about something. And I wouldn't know what that is, but to kind of think throughout the workshop about what it is that they individually can do. Now, I think I've been doing this for 14 years now. I think the idea of pledges has caught on a lot more since, and, can be a bit naff possibly, and I've always said, I'm not interested at all. And this has been a bit maverick in terms of perhaps measuring and NHS England and so on, in how many pledges, what does that mean? But it's trying to find out and follow up afterwards what's happened as a result of the pledges, and to support people in delivering those pledges, and then with social media to try and connect them to other people who are already doing amazing things, and then Fab NHS stuff who can share things so you don't start with a blank page. And you can see people, you can see them come alive in terms of, I can actually do something here. And it might be very small, but then the small things add up.
Yeah, I totally agree. We've got into some really super interesting discussions around measurement. So let me be sort of clear on a few things that I think. So you can absolutely measure kindness. You can absolutely measure relationships. You can measure trust and things. The sorts of things that you and I know from the work we've been doing are absolutely key ingredients to the sort of change we want to go and see. The next interesting question is, to what extent, how useful is it to spend time, energy, and effort measuring these things? Really fantastic. Couple of social researchers came and helped us. Simon Brownlee, related to work that had been done with the Carnegie UK Trust around measuring kindness. And Simon ran one of the workshops. And I think what I loved about his challenge, he said, look, before we get into the detail of how you measure kindness, there's a really important question of, do you actually want to? And we kicked that around very hard. And I think, we have a healthcare system in England in particular, but actually more widely in the UK, that is focused just above my head. This will be voice out there, but you and I've got the pleasure of talking to each other with video too, is Julia Unwin's wonderful work about the rational and the relational. And we've had this strong bias to measuring the rational stuff. Now, that's been really important, and following mid-staffs and all of the terrible things there was very key, but we've completely forgotten about this importance around the relational. So there's this strong and gross bias towards processes that are easily measurable. And people are too disinterested in whether the processes actually connect up to real meaningful outcomes that actually matter to patients, because they're too busy counting the processes, to your point. So as you say, I don't care whether there's 100 pledges or 1,000 pledges or 10,000 pledges. If they don't, or at least some of them don't connect to meaningful change that matters to the people who we're here to serve, forget it. It's a pointless process count. So I completely agree with you. We have to really think hard about, and the trouble is the measurement story has got so much power to it, and it's where the money sits, and it's when people are always talking about metrics and things without really thinking it through. So what I learned from all my improvement training is the first thing you've got to be clear about is, what do you want to achieve? So there are countless measures and metrics and dashboards sitting around in the NHS with absolutely no clear connection to what they really want to achieve. So question one is, what do you want to achieve? The second thing is about, what are the sorts of activities and things that logically or through evidence will get you to what you want to achieve? And then comes in the measurement bit. How will you know you're on the journey? How will you know you're making progress? How will you know that some things are really working and some things really aren't? So yes, you absolutely need measurement, but boy, we spend a lot of time and taxpayers' money measuring the wrong things.
Absolutely. And whenever, if someone approaches me and says they're interested in the Who Shoes workshop, and I've just got such a radar for spotting tick boxes, and sometimes when something gets a bit more successful, the danger is it can become, we need one of those Who Shoes thingies, and I don't want to go there, because it's a grassroots, it's a passionate, it's about wanting to achieve something. So that's always my first question. Well, what is it you're trying to achieve? Yeah. Rather than going in with a tool, because ultimately it is just a tool.
Well, it is, although I think, and I need to come and experience one of the workshops is, but I bet my bottom dollar, I'm sure it'll be very energizing, is I bet it's really hard work as well, and is deep. And one of the things that I've been, I have some fun. I can think of a group, so I quite regularly do, or very regularly, do a session with a really wonderful program that actually has been set up within the trust that is pitched at people early in their consultant careers, and it's a leadership development program. And there's a wide program and some really super things on it, and some great, really fab people come and talk and run workshops and do interactive things. I think it's excellent, and the team who've run it should be really proud of it. They get me for an hour on this sort of kindness bit, and I always start it with a bit of, I expect you're expecting, this is the bit to sort of put your feet up. This is like, you've had pretty heavy morning, and you get to the contrary. This is going to be the hardest and most heavyweight and most difficult hour of the whole course. We're going to really, really go hard and things like that. And people look at me going, you're bluffing. Are you sure, really? you get to the 40-minute mark and people are really feeling it. This is a really heavyweight, this work that, and I think it's really important to say, isn't it? You're in my networks and conversations that we've had with people, there's a lot of really wonderful people doing some really, really interesting work in this broader space, really linked to the human side of care. And that would be a sort of a common thread. And I think one of the things that's rather wonderful about it is people are, I think, very generous and keen to connect. There's not lots of elbows out going, oh, what I'm doing is more important. No. I think there's a deep belief that this sort of collective movement, and I think movements are really helpful for AIDS. But this is the direction of travel, without a shadow of doubt. And there's a bit of, I'm trying to create a bit of jeopardy here as well for people who are sort of still trying to hang on to a different way of working that involves bullying, that involves shouting at people, that involves deep hierarchies. That stuff has gone. Well, it's not completely gone, but it is a successful way to run a healthcare system, has absolutely been fundamentally disproven. There's some bad habits that are still whirring away out there, and that's the stuff that we need to try and get on top of.
Yeah, it's so important. And coming back a little bit to what you were talking about before, and changing norms, I suppose, and the concentration on data and things that are kind of easier rather than, in inverted commas, softer, fluffier, less measurable things. One of the podcast episodes so far that I'd love you to connect with. And I think, I look at statistics, and sometimes the ones that I think should be the most influential aren't. And Miles Sibley and the work he's doing with the Patient Experience Library and the evidence that he's building behind the fact that patient stories, and just listen to that language, the anecdotal patient stories compared with the medical reports. And as a patient, I might make a complaint, but you make a serious incident report, or just the language that sits behind it. And he's collected 70,000 documents, but he's also, it strikes me as a really clever guy who can actually not just say this needs to be different, but why. So I think with you, with kindness and what matters to you and patient stories, it's coming together as a big movement, isn't it?
It certainly is. And I think organizations are really starting to do things differently. We're an organization that historically had just not been interested or curious in this. We did a big and deep piece of work around looking at our values, and which was co-produced. I was involved in running well over 100 workshops with over 2,000 staff, really asking the question, what matters, what are the things, what should this organization be about? I think reflection that we didn't always get that right. We realized we'd be doing more about values and less about behaviors. We really moved on to a sort of focus in and around behaviors. And what's really interesting, my wonderful colleague, Michelle Dixon, who's our Director of Communication and Engagement, she's setting up, with help from a wide group, essentially a focus on user insights. So users, not the best word, but what we mean by users is really everybody who's involved in our services. So that's our direct patients, but that's our local residents, that's local charity, business, council partners, other NHS partners, that's all of our staff. We're really trying to be quite systematic about how do we learn from the insights of the people who are coming to contact with us as an organization in any shape or form, and how do we use that to systematically drive improvement. That's a very, very different way of looking at things. And to your point, we're really trying to give equal weighting to all sorts of different sources around it, rather than you used the word around, I think it's just laziness on the measurement bit. This idea that things are easy to measure, we've got the data already, so that's the stuff. It's just laziness, and it shows a lack of understanding of the logic that we talked about. Is be clear about what you want to achieve, and that should be linked to the things that most matter to our patients, the things that are going to make the biggest difference to our local communities, our local citizens. And then co-produce, what are the things we're going to try and test to try and improve them, and then the measurement comes in. So just the fact we've got the data is irrelevant, but yet people seem to jump on that all of the time. So I'm a pretty ruthless at spotting that lack of logic and calling that out.
Brilliant. Yeah, I love it. It takes me right back, actually. I'm right back there working for my local authority before I jumped ship and set up Who's Shoes. And I was working around quality improvement and performance, and suddenly outcomes became the buzzword. And I had this guy telling me I needed to report on outcomes. And I just had this gut feeling that something needed to come before the outcomes.
Yes.
We were just in two different worlds, and I didn't know, and it was the same like with my early work around personalization and seeing senior people, suddenly it was the buzzword in social care and talking about choice, but actually how does that work in a completely risk-averse society?
Yeah.
And that's really where Who's Shoes came from, like looking at these tensions and trying to call them out, like you're saying.
Yeah, and they are, I think, just to pick on the word tension around stuff, and I think these things are tensions, and they're really real. And I think sometimes it can sound, can't it, that this conversation can sound like a bit of an assault on, the people who are working on in a performance management setting or dealing with contracts or things. But I think we both strongly argue to say, let's be curious about that tension. Let's try and understand it better. Let's try and look at things from different angles. Let's be much more open and curious. I mean, I think the word curiosity and being curious is really, really important. You know, I'd really encourage people listening, just try out this idea that maybe all of us just aren't quite so sure about what the answers are that we might think they are. Just hold a slightly more curious space. Challenge yourself to think about some of the things you've thought about as just being, oh, well, that's how it is. Why do they actually have to be? Of course, hanging out with kids children are absolutely brilliant at that. They do. We learn, don't we, in management improvement programs and courses about things like ask the 5 whys. I mean, I've watched children ask 19 whys in a row, and they're brilliant at that developmental curiosity, and work beats it out of us somewhat. So I'd really encourage people to go and get themselves a little bit more curious.
Yeah, well, I'm quite proud of that, because I wanted to come on to the fantastic videos that you're putting together about kindness, crowdsourced by all the different people. Yeah. And amazing how different people are coming up with different aspects of kindness to show at the conference, the Quality and Safety Forum. But my little clip, and thank you so much for including it, was around being curious.
Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, and you're so right. And just on that, I think, I touched on the word about generous, and I introduce the importance of learning to who I am and what I really care about. And the wonderful thing about this work is, you're very kindly, I mean, I've sort of found myself sort of finding myself a little bit on the tiller of this sort of boat. But the truth is, in lots of ways, it's nothing really to do with me. It's a convening of a whole group of extraordinary people. And as you say, we've got people now from 30 different countries who have found a sense of collective power, collective learning, collective curiosity from spending a bit of time together, lots of little touch points. I absolutely love, I mean, if I had more time, I'd do a PhD on the connections that it's triggered off. And I think it's just that great sense of generosity that people have to share, to learn, to really want to do everything they can to make things better. And I think a recognition, when you think about everything that's going across the world at the moment, and where we are, whatever angle you're interested in taking, whether it's around climate, whether it's around economic development, whether it's around the fact that people still die of diseases they shouldn't die of, whether it's about war, I mean, really sort of take your pick on it. I think coming together around this sort of work gives people a real sense of hope. It gives people a sense of connection, and that feels really, really, really important. And we mustn't overstate the impact, but I think recognizing that being connected, being part of it, goes back to this human thing, being part of a movement, being part of society in that way, gives us great strength and great courage to go and do all sorts of amazing things. And you mentioned our incredible friends down in the Southern Hemisphere. I mean, I'll be doing it again at 6:00 UK time tonight, of wondering what on earth they're doing at 4:00 in the morning. I feel like sort of sending someone round to their door to knock on the door and say, go to bed, don't be ridiculous. But they contribute so much, and I of course love having them there. So yeah, there's something about that sense of community. And I guess researchers much smarter than me have written lots of wonderful things about communities of practice and movements and how, but very fundamentally is this human thing about let's look after each other, let's be kind to each other, let's be generous to each other, let's stay curious, let's keep trying to learn. And that's, to me, is most likely to lead to a sort of happy and productive life.
And it's fun too. I think
exactly.
I'm absolutely rubbish at measuring things, and it's not what I set out to do. And it, hopefully somewhere along the line that catches up, in some way, whether it's sort of shared stories or whatever. I'm more into the sort of storytelling side. But your PhD would need to pick up some of the informal connections. So, for example, I've had a chat with Kath Kroc from the Hush Foundation. I was absolutely, as you may remember, fascinated by Nikki Macklin with her needles and noodles and how that linked with Miles Sibley and his patient stories. So those ripples, I think, I don't know how to measure them, but I can feel them, and that's important.
Well, and listen, I think you're onto something there. So there are ways to measure them, but again, our bias is we go to the technical, we surround it with a whole load of things. So I love your piece about feeling them and what's the value in feeling them and doing something with them and energizing them, or talking to me about them, or giving you enough courage and motivation to go and act on something or to make further connections. So I think, again, go back to that provocation that Simon gave us of like, why do you really want to measure? There's a transactional cost to measurement. You can put stuff in the way of it and cloud it in the way, and it's probably the reason you're not wildly good at it, Jill. It's a bit like there's people who, could you go home every night and write, the doctors get asked to sort of write a reflective portfolio on what's happened today. Well, if I think about it, I reflect, I often do it on the bicycle about all the different things going on in my head, and will sense make that stuff. Thankfully, as I'm on my bicycle, I'm not there with a pen and paper trying to write it down. So I'm rubbish at writing it down. But when I think about it, I definitely reflect, and I'll bounce things off people and talk. So it feels like my reflective practice is good. My documentation of reflective practice is absolutely terrible. Yeah, that's maybe something for me to improve on, or not.
And I said, and I've just done a What Matters to You podcast, and I said within that now I've completely lost my train now, so I'm going to have to edit this. we were so fluent. I got really excited about something there. What was it, Bob? Got no idea. Going on my head in these sessions just goes in.
I can imagine how you keep them. You invite characters like me on, trying to keep things on the vaguely straight and narrow. It's near impossible, I suspect.
But I was trying to do a crowdsourced podcast, bringing in different voices in terms of what matters to you, and I ended up, wow. Yeah. So I think perhaps it was around. It ended up as a bit of a stream of consciousness, and I don't know how it landed for other people, but I think the key point for me was that sometimes some of the biggest stuff that I've done, I have ended up with zero record of it because I've just been too busy. Whereas, when you're a bit less busy, you've got more time to kind of make the most of the things you've done, perhaps make the little videos, share the stories, write the blog, that was my point.
Yeah. Well, it's a really interesting piece. And again, we haven't been great on the kindness conversation around that, because it's felt like putting the energy into convening and facilitating, and as there's a lot of sort of voluntary effort here from people. So we've definitely been much less good as we could be at the sort of capture piece around it. So yeah, stuff to think about. But I think, again, being guided by what are the real value activities, what are the things that are going to matter the most and make the most impact. There's something about being quite deliberate about that. I like the word deliberate. There's some wonderful spontaneous things that happen, but being deliberate about what you're doing also feels quite important.
So this is links to this. Dr. Mary Salama, who I don't know if you know.
I do know.
I thought you must do.
I've been lucky enough to go and visit her in Birmingham, if I've
Amazing.
got the right. Yeah.
Well, we have set up, Mary and I, intentional coffee, #intentional coffee. And it would be that a deliberate, the kind of person, a bit like today, Bob, that you come across and you're interested and you'd like to sort of find out more about, actually, rather than a random coffee, make that effort and kind of like perhaps be a bit bold to invite somebody and see where it goes.
Well, we teach in our improvement work about something called a relational meeting, which the community organisers, and there'll be community organising experts listening to this, I have no doubt, but it's one of the key tools that community organisers have in their toolbox around things. So it's absolutely intentional, but is not transactional around, right, Jill, can we meet because I want to look at the end of year this, and we've got to do planning for quarter 4, or that's a transactional meeting. This is about, tell me about what you're thinking and how are you feeling and what are the things that really matter to you. But as you say, it can absolutely have intention.
So I'm conscious you've got to go, Bob. I really don't want to keep you
to something much less interesting. That's it. No, I'm very lucky. I do lots of really interesting things. My next meeting is about we're doing some exploring around how we can do much more employment of local people. So thinking about our role as an anchor as an organisation. So that's where I'm off to next. But
that is very interesting. Yeah,
very interesting. And
connecting with the community, isn't it?
Connect with the community, and hey, this thread about understanding about the things that really matter to people, this thread about kindness, so I'm really interested. Yes, you can be a kind individual or a kind leader, but actually how do we behave in that way as an organization, as a healthcare system? Absolutely key. So I think the culture of the organization we're trying to run here, we're really trying to think very hard about that at an organizational and system level as well, which is really exciting.
Well, I'm sure we could talk all day.
I have no doubt. I think probably both of us could. Yes, exactly.
So I'm sure there are loads of things we haven't covered, Bob, but what we have covered has been very real and spontaneous. And just thanks for jumping in and making time for it. I'm really grateful.
It's an absolute pleasure, and always happy to talk more and think more and indeed do more. So listen, I'll look forward to seeing you a bit later on the conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Bob. Okay, bye then.
Bye-bye.
I hope you have enjoyed this episode. If so, please subscribe now to hear more of these fascinating conversations on your favourite podcast platform, and please leave a review. I tweet as Whose Shoes. Thank you for being on this journey with me, and let's hope that together we can make a difference.